Victor, Mitch McConnell. Let's start off with Mitch. I have a note here. Let's see. Headline. This is from website Woke Spy. Mitch McConnell attacks MAGA. Here's what he says. Outgoing Senate Majority Leader. It's not Majority Leader. He's Minority Leader. Mitch McConnell claims that the America First slogan is similar to those used in the 1930s before World War II. McConnell told the Financial Times, we're in a very, very dangerous world right now, reminiscent of before World War II. Even the slogan is the same, America First. That is what they said in the 30s. The cost of deterrence is considerably less than the cost of war, blah, blah, blah. He does not like Donald Trump and does not like the people who like Donald Trump, who I would assume are the vast majority of the voters of Kentucky.
Senator McConnell, could I be so arrogant from my Selma perch to school you on a reality that you seem to be totally ignorant of? In 1939, the U.S. Army was smaller than Portugal. We had no Air Force to speak of. It was not even independent. It was part of the Army Air Corps. Our Navy was smaller, at least in the Pacific, than the Japanese and much smaller than the British Navy. We spent almost nothing. There was no Pentagon. Today, as we speak, the United States spends more money on defense than China does. And if you take China out of the equation, we spend more than the next 10 nations combined. I know a lot of it's on healthcare, DI, pensions, but we have an enormous budget. We have reduced our fleet and our Air Force, but we have about 50,000 people all over the world stationed. And you could argue that except for the Philippines in 1939, we were almost nowhere. We have 6,500 nuclear weapons, and they were the best nuclear weapons in the world. They're 6 times the number of China. To suggest that somehow this country is like it was in 1939 and asleep to threats with this enormous power is absolutely ahistorical and reckless. If you mean that we have no will to use it, I think you don't understand that we just came out of $4 trillion and 20 years in humiliating fashion in Afghanistan, and we have been 20 years more or less in Iraq, and we've lost totally somewhere around, 7,000 to 8,000 dead, and we have about 150 installations all over the world, and that our soldiers have been attacked from the Red Sea to Syria. Are you aware of that? Are you aware that our Navy was just knocking down with anti-ballistic missile systems, and our Air Force, Iranian projectiles going into Israel? We are fully engaged, even under the derelict Joe Biden. To suggest that anyone who says after 1.5 million dead, wounded, and missing Russians and Ukrainians, a devastated Ukraine where 12 million people, about 28% of the population, are no longer in Ukraine, where about 55% of the population of Ukraine polled wants a settlement, even if it involves the surrender of already appropriated Ukrainian territory to Russia, i.e. Crimea and the Donbass. And to suggest that the people with the United States with such military preparedness and such a record of not achieving strategic victory or resolution after tactical success after success in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, that somebody might just suggest that it is time. And the person, Mr. McConnell, who is suggesting this, is the only person out of the last 24 years that somebody in Russia did not invade somebody else outside of Russia. That was Donald Trump, not George W. Bush, not Barack Obama, not George. To suggest that this person is like a Neville Chamberlain or asleep at the wheel Roosevelt in 1939 is just ignoramus. What he's trying to say is that we have spent $150 billion in Ukraine, and that was good maybe, and we saved it from being absorbed, but it's time to negotiate an end to a killing field that is larger than World War II's Stalingrad. And to suggest that somehow he's a 1939 appeaser when the United States was disarmed and, Europe, Poland was invaded, all of Poland was absorbed, is not very historically accurate. Donald Trump did more to ensure the military preparedness. After he cajoled and lectured and screamed at NATO, they spent another $100 billion collectively. That wasn't enough, but they did do that. And they went from 2 countries in the alliance to spending their promised 2% of GDP invested in military readiness to about half the alliance, 40% of the alliance now. So it doesn't wash that he is suggesting that the MAGA people are isolation. There are people that are isolationists, but they're not optional interventionists either. And I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I really don't. Donald Trump said, do not hit our ships in the Red Sea. He said, Mr. McConnell, that if there's a drone and he can't identify it and it's in a military installation and he knows this, he wants it shot down. He wants it shot down. What more do you want him to say? That you want to supply the Ukrainian military that is racked with dissension and a country that's lost a fourth of its population is decimated to do what? Invade Moscow? Go to Moscow? Use the hypersonic missiles that we're giving them to hit targets deep inside Russia that has 6,500 nuclear weapons as well? Just say what you want. Don't just make fun of MAGA. That's a cheap shot. Just say what you want us to do. Just say it. How many $1 billion do you want to give? You say, we give them $160 billion. I'm Mitch McConnell. They cannot protect themselves from an aggressive Russia, now armed with up to maybe 100,000 North Koreans, and we should give them and borrow. We owe $37 trillion, but I want to borrow, $200 billion more to give them. Screw the people in the Carolinas and Georgia. They're living in tents. Screw the people in East Palo. I don't care. Screw the people around the border. The border, we're getting cheap labor. It's no problem, 12 million illegal aliens. I'm worried most about Ukraine. Just say it, and then make the intellectual defense of it. But don't demagogue it by saying, it's 1939, and I got that metaphor I read in Wall Street Journal, and I picked it up. But I know nothing about 1939. I have no historical knowledge about the military readiness of the United States in 1939 vis-a-vis what it is.
Yeah.
We were appeasing because we did not have a military. And people understood that. And when we did have a military, we began not to be appeasing. And we didn't have a military because people, mostly in the Republican Party, to tell you the truth, and the Democratic Party, they thought the Depression was such that it was politically unpalatable to build battleships and carriers when people were starving. And the person who did it was not a Republican. He was Carl Vinson. He was an old-style, segregationist, Southern Democrat. And from 1934 to 1939, he had something called the Carl Vinson Naval Act. And it was only because of him that when we went to war in 41, we had by the end of 42 carriers and battleships and cruisers and submarines. So I wish he would read a little history and then be moderate in his remarks. But he's so bitter about, and I understand he has reason to. He was the punching bag of MAGA people. He was the symbol of, he's married to someone who's a billionaire who has strong mainland Chinese ties. She has a shipping company, her family does. They've been making a ton of money.
Peter Schweitzer's written about them at
Peter Schweitzer's written a link. He's very sensitive to that fact.
Yeah.
He'll go down in Republican history for doing one great thing, and that was no one mastered better the laws of the Senate as they pertain to judicial appointments. And he was able to navigate at very difficult times the confirmation of Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. And I guess, I don't know if he was Comey Brown, Vera, I don't know if he did much there. She was kind of a shoe at that point. But the Kavanaugh and the Gorsuch were due to his mastery of Senate rules and protocols, and and he should be congratulated for that.
Yeah.